Joan from CIT. We're so glad that you're joining us for Church Online. You know, today is a special day. It's Mother's Day here in Canada. So let's take some time to remember our moms today, thank them, video call them if you can. You know, personally, I wouldn't be the person I am today without my mom and her love. And with our mother's love, it often points us to an even greater love from our Heavenly Father. So I'm praying that during this time, you're able to really feel His presence and, you know, have a warm embrace from Him. Now, in this season or in any other time, if you are in need of prayer, we would be so happy to pray for you. All you need to do is just go over to mycit.info and fill out a prayer request form. And speaking of moms, for our parents, our troopers right now, we've created a new CIT Kids YouTube channel where you can access personalized Bible story videos as well as worship playlists. So go on over to mycit.info where we've created easy links for your access. In addition, we've also added a kids survey where, you know, the kids ministry just wants to check in on you to see how you've been doing during this time. So make sure to fill that out as well. You know, CIT's mission is to lead people into a life-changing relationship with Jesus. And if you'd like to partner with us, we would be so grateful. You can go to churchintoronto.com and make a donation there. We're about to enter our time of worship. And, you know, during this time, do what you need to do, whether it's to sing along, to reflect, to pray. Let's just enter this time with an open heart and give praise to our God. We hope that this week's message motivates you and encourages you, and we hope that you have a great week. We'll see you back.
The Lord Almighty, and our God is the Lion of Judah. He's roaring with power and fighting our battles, and every knee will bow before Him. And our God is the Lamb that was slain for the sins of the world. His blood breaks the chains. Every knee will bow before the Lion and the Lamb, and every knee will bow before Him. So open up the gates, make way before the King of Kings. Is here to set the captives free. Who can stop the Lord Almighty? And our God is the Lion of Judah. He's roaring with power and fighting our battles, and every knee will bow before Him. And our God is the Lamb that was slain for the sins of the world. His blood breaks the chains, and every knee will bow before the Lion and the Lamb, and every knee will bow before Him. And who can stop the Lord Almighty? Who can stop the Lord Almighty? Who can stop the Lord Almighty? Who can stop the Lord? You give light, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. And great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. Great are you, Lord. You give light, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. Great are you, Lord. Oh, great are you, Lord. All the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry. These bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. And all the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry. These bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. And all the
Good morning, everyone. It's so good to see you again. I want to say a special happy Mother's Day to all the mums out there. I know you may be sitting on your couches next to your mom right now, or maybe it's your wife. Would you just say, Mom, thank you so much for doing what you do, for being who you are. I love you. Go ahead. Got to say it. All right. You know, I can't think of a better day actually for us to be giving this message, because today's message is all about self-sacrifice. Today's message title is What is God Showing You? And before we dive into the verses, I wanted to just take a second to ask you this question though. What are you noticing about yourself the longer we stay in isolation? You know, you may be having some realizations about yourself. Some of you may be realizing, you know what? I'm really not a good teacher. Or maybe you're having a realization, hey, I can actually cut hair. No matter what it is, you know, it's good to have that kind of realization about yourself. Maybe you're the kind of person who's really, really introverted and you just love this notion of being in isolation and being alone. Or maybe you're a doer and it's like, oh, this is awesome because now I get to do all kinds of the jobs around the house that I was hoping that I could get to. But some of the other things also might be some tendencies that you're noticing about yourself. You might be noticing that there are certain habits that you have and they're becoming a lot more pronounced now that you're with yourself a whole lot more. And maybe it's something like, I'm pretty unfocused when I'm not in my office. So that's what might be going on in your home and in your personal life. But today I want to ask you this question. What is God showing you? You know, as you follow Jesus as his disciple, what do you see about him and what do you see about yourself? If he shows you something unhealthy that's going on inside of you, what are you going to do? And this is what I want you to get from the very beginning here. This is a critical point. Take God's help. As he identifies something within you, take the help that he gives to you. He's not asking you to follow him based solely on your willpower or your determination. He's simply saying this: you are a follower of Jesus. Rely on Jesus. Remember, he is your Savior. So see what God is showing you and take his help as you move forward. If you've been with us for a while now, you know we're in the book of Mark and we're looking at discipleship in this book. And you know already that Jesus has laid out in the last couple of weeks, starting in chapter 8, the pathway that he is going to take. And it's a pathway towards the cross, and it's a pathway of self-sacrifice. And we're going to look at that this morning. Let me read the verses for you. It's Mark chapter 9, verses 30 to 32. It goes this way. Then they left that place and made their way through Galilee, but he did not want anyone to know it. For he was teaching his disciples and telling them, the Son of Man is going to be betrayed into the hands of men. They will kill him, and after he is killed, he will rise 3 days later. But they, that's his disciples, did not understand this statement, and they were afraid to ask him. So this may sound really familiar to you if you've been with us for the last little while, because this is the second time that Jesus is telling his disciples about his death and about his resurrection. You know, as a former teacher, here's one thing I know. Repetition really works. Jesus here is continuing to tell his disciples what is going to happen, what is the pathway that he's going to take. And what I love about this is how patient he is. Remember in the first time that he mentioned this, there was a lot of blowback from Peter, and he was saying, no way, this can't possibly happen. And Jesus pushed back on him. And even as we saw last week, as Nigel was sharing with us, we saw that God actually had his say and put his 2 cents worth in and said, no, guys, you've got to listen to this person, Jesus, because he really is telling you the truth, and you need to really follow him. So repetition works. And what I love about Jesus here is he's just so patient and so kind and so loving. He didn't just give up on them and say, you didn't get it the first time, so that's it. I remember when I was teaching a number of years ago, there was one child who came to be with us, and he had been taught how to read by his mom. She taught him phonetically, so he knew all the sounds of the letters and everything else. The problem was he got 2 letters mixed up. His mom had told him the wrong pronunciation. And so, of course, when he was just speaking normally, there was no problem. But when he was reading out loud, boy, that was a real problem. He just kept mixing words up, and there was giggles in the class, and it was really, really awkward for him. But what I loved is the patience and the love that the teachers showed to him. And it was a repeated thing. He would keep making mistakes, but we didn't give up on him. We just kept helping him to get this thing straightened out. And I'll be honest with you, I think the disciples were a lot like this. They had certain concepts, and God was gently moving them forward in their walk with him. They actually, the verses even say, they did not understand what Jesus was talking about. And honestly, I really don't blame them, because when they had a notion of a Messiah, the Jewish notion of a Messiah would have been, we're returning to the days of glory, to the days of David and the days of Solomon. And that's what they were thinking. So for them to hear that Jesus is going to die, that was absurd to them. They couldn't take that at all. But what God is showing them is this: what I am going to accomplish is through self-sacrifice. I'm not going to accomplish it as a political liberator. One of the things that we've been covering over the last couple of weeks as well is that not only is Jesus taking a certain pathway, but he's also inviting his disciples to take the same pathway of self-sacrifice that he is taking. So if you remember back to chapter 8 and verse 34, that's where Jesus is saying, if anyone wants to come after me or follow me, he needs to deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. And so I've heard over the last couple of weeks, just in some of our community groups, that some of you are struggling a little bit with this notion of denying yourself and taking up your cross. And I just wanted to say this one thing. You can count on Jesus to never give up on you. If you're having difficulty following Jesus, or you're struggling with inner things, inner issues, just open your heart to him and begin to let him know what's going on. Ask him for his help, and I guarantee you, he's going to help you. As we're following Jesus, we're always going to face situations that are a little uncomfortable. And what we're going to look at today, we're going to look at 2 cases where the disciples, as they're following Jesus, they get themselves into some uncomfortable situations. And Jesus is so gracious, so loving, he just sees where they're at and shows them how to go through that very thing. So let's start with the very first one. This is from Mark chapter 9, verses 33 through 37. Let me read the verses for you. They came to Capernaum. When he was in the house, he asked them, "What were you arguing about on the way?" But they were silent, because on the way they had been arguing with one another about who was the greatest. Sitting down, he called the 12 and said to them, "If anyone wants to be first, he must be last and servant of all." He took a child, had him stand among them, and taking him in his arms, he said to them, "Whoever welcomes one little child such as this in my name welcomes me. And whoever welcomes me does not welcome me, but him who sent me." This is, again, I guess what I would say, a little title for this is self-exaltation. Who is greatest? So now the self is starting to come out of his disciples in this particular case, and just watch what Jesus does. But before we touch on that, I wanted to say a little word about greatness. I personally believe that God puts this desire for greatness in each and every one of us. And I think when you talk to a child and ask them, what do you want to be when you grow up? They have things like, I want to be an astronaut. I want to be a doctor. I want to be a firefighter. I checked with my 6-year-old granddaughter that just before coming here, and I asked her, hey, Naomi, what do you want to be? And she said, Granddad, I want to be a veterinarian. And so, in the purity of the way that they are as they're so young, there's no thought of, I'm going to, other people are going to say amazing things about me. It's just that's what they want to do. But unfortunately, somewhere along the lines, that desire gets warped and bent. And instead of wanting to make a difference and wanting to be something in our world, it's more like we now want to be thought of as great. Because after all, I've got so much power, and I've got so much money, and I've got so much fame, and I'm so beautiful. So the disciples are in this situation. They're in that bent situation now, and they're arguing with one another who's the greatest. And I want to again remind you of what's just happened. As Nigel shared last week, the disciples, Peter, James, and John, they'd been up the mountain with Jesus, and they'd seen incredible things. They'd actually heard from God. But where were the other 9? The other 9 were at the bottom of the mountain. And what we find out, we didn't cover this story, but you can go back and look at it. They had been trying to cast out a demon from someone, and they couldn't do it. So you've got this contrast of success and amazing revelation for Peter, James, and John, and the other 9, not so much. And so now these 12 disciples with Jesus are walking away from this mountain, and now they're starting to have a conversation, and they're starting to argue with each other. Who do you think is the greatest? And you can well imagine that Peter and James and John, they're thinking, yeah, well, we must be the greatest because we were up there with Jesus. And so I think what you begin to see here is that notion, that self-exaltation, that self-love, and that self-promotion. And what you're not seeing here is what Jesus is trying to help his disciples to see and to be, and that is self-sacrificing people. A big part of the problem, actually another part of the problem is probably a better way of saying it, is that they lived in a world that had its own view of greatness. And again, as I said, to them, Jesus was supposed to be, or the Messiah was supposed to be, a political liberator. And you know what? There would have been huge benefit in that for them. So they would have got more power, more honor, more status because of that. But let me come back to our title for this message. What is God showing you? What was God showing the disciples? What was Jesus showing his disciples at that time? And also, what is the help that he is going to give them? Again, when we come to these verses, I love the way it begins. Jesus sat down. That is typical posture for a rabbi to start teaching. He doesn't rebuke them. He's not saying, oh, why are you thinking that? Oh, you're failures. He does not say that. He sits down and he begins to help them through. And he says words like this: if anyone wants to be first, or if anyone wants to be great, he must be a servant of all. So if greatness is what you want, be a servant of all. Sacrifice yourself for others. And Jesus could so easily say to them, just do what you have seen being done by me and in me. But again, that was a difficult ask in those days because the Roman life revolved a lot around Plato and his thoughts. And listen to one of Plato's famous sayings. He said this: how can a man be happy when he has to serve someone? So think about the contrast. You've got a Roman culture or ethos that's saying, you can't possibly be happy if you are serving someone else. And Jesus is saying, no, the way to be happy, the way to be great is to serve someone else. And then here's another step that Jesus takes. He actually has them witness an object lesson. He brings a little child in, and he takes that child in his arms. And it's like he's saying this: let me show you what greatness really looks like. And again, this is a complete paradigm shift for them. Because again, in their Roman society, a child is worth nothing. And so for you as an adult to spend time with that child, well, there would just be there's no benefit to you in doing it. But Jesus is saying, no, there is huge benefit in you caring for them. So what I really love about this is Jesus is just tapping right in to what is upsetting them. And he's like this: there is a desire within you to be something or to get something. And what you have to learn to do is to deny it. If greatness is what you want, be a servant of all. That would be his message. Then I wonder, what does self-sacrifice look for us today? What does it look like for us today? Maybe it's caring for your family, doing the dishes, cleaning your room, cleaning up after dinner, cooking a dinner. And again, no benefit to you, no glory, but you're just serving other people. You might want to just run out and do whatever you want to do, but yet you need to serve the other people. I remember back in my own experience when I was a younger pastor, I used to read the Bible a whole lot more because I needed to learn and I needed to study a lot. And at that time we had our 3 kids. They were much younger, and I'd either be in my office or I'd be in the living room doing my reading. And many times, as Deb is getting the dinner set up and the kids are being kids, maybe causing some mischief or getting under her skin, I could tell she was getting more and more annoyed. Why? Because the pots and pans were starting to hit the stove a little louder. And she was giving me verbal cues like, things along those lines. And of course, I'm sitting there and I'm reading my Bible and I'm thinking to myself, man, I wish those people could just be a little more quiet. I'm reading the Bible here. But God is so good. Because right in that moment when I'm thinking and saying those things to myself, God comes and he says this: Ian, put down that Bible and go and help your wife. What is God trying to show me about my Bible reading at that moment? Ian, it's selfish. Ian, it's self-centered. And Ian, it's all about you. So the Holy Spirit is right there with me. He's not condemning me. He's helping me to see what's going on inside of me and encouraging me to put it aside, to deny it, and then to sacrifice my own selfish desires, put them aside, and go and help my wife. Another thing is, remember it's Mother's Day today, and is there anyone you know who puts their self-interests aside for you more than your mom? Talk about sacrificing themselves. They aren't mums for the glory, you know that, right? They aren't mums because they get a bump in pay or anything like that. Just, they sacrifice for you because of their love for you. Think about all the nights, the late nights, holding you when you were sick, and you probably had no idea they were doing it. Think about all the rides they gave you to this and that place. Think about all the help they've given to you. That's what makes a mother great. Self-sacrifice. Sacrificing yourself for others is how God measures greatness. The last thing that we want to point out this morning is the very last section we're going to cover. Let me read that for you. That's Mark chapter 9, verses 38 to 41. John said to Jesus, "Teacher, we saw someone driving out demons in your name, and we tried to stop him because he wasn't following us." "Don't stop him," said Jesus, "because there is no one who will perform a miracle in my name who can soon afterwards speak evil of me. For whoever is not against us is for us. And whoever gives you a cup of water to drink in my name because you belong to Christ, truly I tell you, he will never lose his reward." Little title for this section would be Self-Importance, They Aren't With Us. Sometimes, so in this story here, you've got someone who is casting out a demon, and the disciples, they are upset. Why? Because he's casting out a demon, but he's not one of us. I think you should also get the irony here. Again, if you go to that story right before the section we're covering today, the same disciples were trying to cast out a demon, and they couldn't do it. So here they are, stopping someone doing what they couldn't do. And of course, it seems like that this person was actually quite successful. But I think there are a number of things, again, that God is trying to help his disciples to see at this particular point. And I think they're helpful for us as well. Number one would be this. Their thought, the disciples' thought is, God only works through us. We're the special ones. We're the ones who were called. And so God limits what he will do to what we will do. Wow. Talk about self-importance, right? Oh, look at us. Number two, the disciples may also have thought this: we don't approve of the way that you're doing it because you're not doing it in our way. Again, self-importance. And the third thing I think is helpful is this. The disciples could have thought, we own this casting out of demons thing, so stop doing it. I remember a number of years ago, I was in another church, and it was a great experience at the very beginning, but it became really unhealthy towards the end. And one of the things that was being taught over and over and over again is, we are the ones, the only ones, who are really following God's way. God has something special with us. So I'm going to be honest with you, that resulted in many of us looking down and despising other Christians, in spite of the fact that God was doing amazing things among them and through them. I would say this, our own self-importance completely blinded us to what God was doing. And I'm going to again come back to our title for today. What is God showing you? What is God showing us? Well, we know what he was showing them, that you are so self-important. How about for us? I believe God is showing us this. Let me show you how dangerous yourself can be. We accept those who follow Jesus, whether they are among us or not. He is casting out a demon. He's serving someone who is in need. Jesus completely endorses what he is doing. Also, Jesus says, whoever is not against us is for us. And he's saying to his disciples, and I hope he's speaking to us as well, be inclusive, accept people who are really following after me. And finally, I would say, Jesus would say actually, I reward those who sacrifice themselves for others. Even if it's the smallest of gestures, the smallest of things, a cup of water to drink. This just shows how much he treasures our self-sacrifice for others. I don't know about you, but when I go through verses like this, I just feel like, what a God that we have. Do you see the help he gives? When our self keeps getting in the way of us being who he really wants us to be, God doesn't toss us aside. God is right there by our side, helping us through. He's there to help you to deny your tendencies. All we need to do is just open our heart and to see the heart behind Jesus and his own self-sacrificing. Recently, I've been enjoying a song called Touch of Heaven from Hillsong Worship. And I love, for sure the lyrics are amazing, but these lyrics in particular are just like a prayer. It says this, I open up my heart to you. I open up my heart to you now. So, do what only you can. I love that. God, Jesus, do what only you can. Jesus, have your way in me now. Would you just close your eyes where you are right now and just say, Jesus, have your way in me now. Have your way in me now. And keep those eyes closed and just say, do what only you can do. Do what only you can do. What are you struggling with right now? What is getting in the way of you following Jesus? I'm going to leave you with those questions because that's a very personal thing, that you know that God is working inside of you. He's encouraging you, urging you to come forward, to follow after him, and you know the things that may be tripping you up. So I'm going to leave those two questions with you. What are you struggling with right now? What is getting in the way of you following Jesus more? And I just want to invite you to bow your heads and pray with me to finish things off this morning. Lord, you know my heart. You know the struggle I have with following you. So I open to you right now for you to do what only you can do. Come right now and help me to surrender to you all that I'm struggling with. Break any stronghold within me. Empower me so I can follow you more freely. I want to take the way of Jesus and lay down myself for others. I ask this all in Jesus' wonderful name. Amen.